So without further ado, let's welcome Orest to tell you all about real-time proving. Please give him a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, Kartik. Thank you, Jacob, and all the crew for having me. Super thrilled to be here, and super cool to see and hear all of the founder support talk and thinking about what we need in terms of the soft components, maybe, and that might lead to broader adoption. I'm here to basically give you the other end of that bridge, of that stick, and that is what we are still missing in terms of infra, in terms of protocol. So I would like to tell you about real-time proving, and real-time proving has been somewhat of a news on Twitter lately. However, I'm here to come and try to convince you that what we care about as an ecosystem is bridging the gaps between the different rollups in Ethereum land. It's specifically composability between the different islands to which maybe some people are doing a great job convincing devs to deploy to on, say, Base, and then there's maybe the Austins of the world deploying the game to some other chain, and now how do we make those talk to one another? And I want to make that possible today, but with the vision of actually creating, like giving tools to create better apps that would hopefully lead to better and more seamless user experience. And by user experience, I mean also the ability for the user not to have to bother whether someone else that they want to interact with happens to live on the same chain or not, in order to, in the end, reach more users and reflect this other end of the spectrum. So maybe before we start, who of you knows what a TEE is? Trusted Execution Environment. Most people, wow. Who of you thinks that there are some sensible, rational, good use cases for TEEs? Almost the same people. Now, who of you thinks TEEs should be used everywhere and all of the use cases make sense? One guy. OK, so we will not be friends, because I do not think that is true. However, at T1, we are using TEEs in a way that we hope makes for the best trade-off in terms of security and performance. And we try to combine them with cryptoeconomic security and ZKP in order to fix the Ethereum fragmentation problem that rollups led to. And the reason for that is, myself, I'm a computer scientist, and the last couple of years before T1, I spent at Scroll with the idea of trying to fix the scalability problem that Ethereum was facing. And by that, I mean, as a computer scientist, creating a system or changing the system towards one where, even though you might be adding more users, more traffic, more interest, more volume, you would keep the desirable properties of this system. In this case, you would keep the property of low fees and also the property of having those money legal composability features, so the ability for one dApp to talk to another seamlessly. And so at Scroll, I observed how ZK rollups managed to fix the first bit of scalability, getting fees to remain low. You can see that with L2s. But unfortunately, did not provide on the other part of the promise, which is keeping composability intact. So let's see how we could potentially fix that today. By real-time proving, what do I mean? Well, I mean the ability to prove the state of some off-chain component, for instance, a rollup, for instance, T1, towards the L1 in less than a single Ethereum L1 block time, currently 12 seconds. And this enables certain properties that we can talk about soon. Now, in T1's case, T1 state actually is not just an intrinsic system. It is allowed to depend on the state of other rollups, such as Scroll, Arbitrum, Base. So this makes it for a composable system where within the T1 node, we follow other rollups and give the developer the ability, once they've been through the training and the shepherding and whatnot, to actually use Solidity to interact with another dApp living on another rollup, on another L2, and react in an asynchronous way to whatever turned out to happen with the request. And all of this is, you can think about basically as a programmable interop layer, a programmable bridge with its own block space. Now, in terms of values, let's touch base on the 12 seconds. When we talk about block like finality, what we are used to is Arbitrum's and Optimism's 7-day finality window due to the optimistic challenge period. This is something that you would naively do if you were to have the result of your game on Arbitrum become some sort of input on the L1. You would need to wait for 7 days for this result to actually become final on L1. Now, for ZK rollups, we are talking about hours. So a lot better, but still not exactly what users need and what developers hope to be able to use. So thus the 12-second threshold. Why 12 seconds? Well, because Ethereum's block time is 12 seconds, so you can't go faster until, of course, Ethereum decides or manages to shorten that block time. The ability for a system such as T1 to follow other rollups and have an ability to real-time prove towards the L1 makes for this additional step where within up to 2 Ethereum blocks, a developer would be able to react to whatever happened in this Arbitrum game and maybe use that output as input to a swap or whatever on scroll, and then, depending on what happened with that trade, do something on yet another rollup. All of this with the point of solving the fragmentation issue, like I outlined earlier. Now, we've had a couple of learnings since we launched our early DevNets. One of them is the market seems to be favoring UX, and this is in particular in the opposition of security. At Scroll and also other rollups, in the early days especially, people thought, well, users will care about security. We need to build this system in a way that will withstand the Third World War scenario. We need to plan even the L1 itself such that we not only be able to scale it 10x, but that we see a path towards scaling it 100x, all without sacrificing security and decentralization. And it seems, unfortunately, people are not like that, most of them. And so this is a learning that we want to embrace towards a more pragmatic approach. Second, people have been talking about multi-chain becoming the future at some point. We see multi-chain as now. We see users go and transact in different chains, and they use insecure multi-sig bridges to make that somewhat acceptable, somewhat bearable in terms of UX. And this fragmentation we expect only to grow. And that also means that it's going to be a political lobbying deed to get those different players, different different types of rollups to cooperate and settle on a common standard. And so because of that, it is that I believe we need to work on systems that do not require the opt-in, the active cooperation of the chains out there. And finally, we've been making some bets early on, maybe early 2024, that used to be quite contrarian, and I would argue they are less of contrarian bets nowadays, such as betting on composables, on synchronous composability used to be a big thing, and I think for many people still is, with base rollups and native rollups and a shared sequencer. And I recall in Bogota for DevCon, there was an event organized by Scroll and Espresso, even before Espresso focused on being a shared sequencer. And yet, in spite of the close connections and a lot of relationship building, it doesn't seem anywhere near that we would have the big roll-ups opt in and sacrifice the autonomy and flexibility and ultimately also power and potentially monetization avenues by doing shared sequencing. And that means, unfortunately, from a technical perspective, that we can't hope for this elegant and visually, aesthetically pleasing to the academic mind synchronous composability world. And we must work towards a asynchronous world with fast asynchrony, with a short latency between the steps. The other thing being real-time proving, we see out there that even ZK is becoming faster. It's, in my opinion, and again a contrarian bet, a couple of years away from hitting production in a permissionless way and for proper block gas limits. But we are seeing this is becoming a thing, and real-time proving, especially sped up with the help of TEEs, could indeed make fast asynchronous composability possible today. Now, when it comes to TEEs secured with crypto economy and ZKP, what does this mean? Well, we know that TEEs have the limits. Maybe at $1 million of price point, could you basically have a node that you operate that contains a TEE broken into by means of some microscopic interventions and have this TEE sign off on something that the source code that it's running would not have been expected to sign off on. And so it's a bad idea to use TEEs for integrity proofs for a rollup without any additional security guarantees or security measures. Because once you hit a certain total value secured threshold, it would become rational for an attacker, for a malicious attacker, to actually break into the TEE and steal the TVS, the total value secured. So in order to fix that, we propose a system where following other nodes is made deterministic by, for instance, not asking, hey, give me the current yield on Aave on Arbitrum, and instead by asking, hey, give me the yield on Arbitrum Aave at this block height. And if there's potentially non-intrinsically deterministic compute, you could introduce determinism via rounding, for instance. And this way, what you can do all of a sudden, which you wouldn't be able to do with privacy TEE setups, is you can attribute faults. So you can, after the fact of someone having provided an incorrect state transition, you can see, oh, this guy must have broken into the TEE or found a bug or whatnot and done something wrong. And so what you can design as a system is you can have multiple people run multiple TEEs that are expected to arrive at the same result via determinism and run consensus among those TEE node operators. And then you can bootstrap this effectively validator set with a significant stake by means of restaking, such as AVS. And so then what could happen for fungible transfers, at least, is that an attacker might be able to break into a sufficient quorum of TEEs, let's say 1/3 for Byzantine fault-tolerant systems, and sign off on something that would allow them to steal your tokens on the L1. However, they would lose the stake, and the victim would be able to get reimbursed from that stake. Now, how about we look at L2 and see what value secured there is for Arbitrum? Well, it's 15 billion. Can we hope to be able to attract 15 billion of restaked stake? Maybe, but better not to have to. And so in order to not have this glass ceiling, what we propose is an additional precaution that I call the bespoke ZKP mechanism, which would keep track of the value at risk, for instance, fungible token transfers outside, like out of your bridge, accumulate that, And as it approaches the security budget threshold, you would incentivize the creation of a zero-knowledge proof that would attest to the correct execution up until this point. And once you do get such a ZKP submitted to the bridge, would you be able to safely reset the value at risk counter and thus never have to stop finalizing the chain, but also not be bound by the security budget. And then, of course, there will be the corner case of someone withdrawing a huge amount at once. And in this case, I would make an exception and have my L1 bridge stop finalization until a ZKP is provided on demand. A cool feature of running TEEs and having nodes follow other chains within a TEE is that you could serve alt L1s even. It doesn't have to be bound to L2s that share, let's say, a DA layer or maybe at least settlement on the L1. It is a bit trickier to support non-EVM chains because we basically have this ambition of allowing the Solidity dev who, there's a lot of Solidity devs, probably soon more to come, and we want them to be able to take their DEX, their game, deploy it to something like T1, and then as the product matures and they want to open up to other ecosystems or tap into other ecosystems' liquidity or users, they would use additional precompiles all on Solidity level in order to do that. And so doing that for non-EVM chains is a bit tricky, but possible in theory. Finally, I wanted to share that we have a DevNet live. We actually launched 2 DevNet so far, and you can literally take it for a spin and see how both depositing from Ethereum Sepolia to T1 as well as going back is near instantaneous. We have a couple of POCs coming as well. We were also lucky to be part of ETH Global Trifecta a couple of months ago, and we've seen a lot of submissions, but also we were, I was very pleased as a former TEE hater and computer science purist to see that TEEs are now considered no longer the bad boy, but actually on par with the hype keywords of ZK and AI. And I think that's very sensible. I believe there is great potentials to be had there. So I was talking about better apps and better UX in order to have more users and actual value. What would those be? We've been talking to potential partners and developers and users, and we see 3 classes of applications. I would like to mention maybe the first class, because we don't have that much time, intents. This is a standard of EIP 7683 that's gaining traction in the Ethereum land, which basically works the following. A user Alice has some funds on Optimism, let's say $10, and she formalizes this intention of receiving at least 9.99 USDC on Arbitrum. This is what we call a 7683 intent. What happens, and the formalization of this intent also includes putting the $10 into an escrow on the source chain Optimism. Now, there's some party somewhere off-chain that we call the solver who will see this intent and go ahead and try to give Alice at least the required amount on Arbitrum. So let's say 9.99 USDC. And then there's some sort of verification that this 9.99 USDC transaction happened, and it somehow makes its way back to the escrow contract on Optimism, which then releases the funds to the solver. And now you can see, well, there's this magic step, settlement verification. How does this work? Well, we somehow need to convey a fact about a transaction on Arbitrum to Optimism. The naive way would be to just send an arbitrary message via the canonical bridge to the L1, wait for 7 days, and then read that message on Optimism using the canonical bridge again, and then release the funds. Means 7 days of frozen funds for the solver. There's no way you would be able to get 9.99 bucks for this. So what happens nowadays is there's permission systems where there's some sort of validators checking maybe within a, currently quite commonly within a 60-minute period that the fill did indeed happen. There's some sort of optimistic oracle system in place for this, and upon the expiry of this window, will the solver on Optimism get the 10 bucks back? Now, with a system like T1, you could very easily see how the 60-minute delay could be reduced to less than 1 minute. And what this means for you as a user might be not obvious, because you wanted to have 9.99, but what happens under the hood is the solver is able to turn around this money 60 times more, and so they are able to offer you a lot more of a competitive bid for your money. This is why you should care, even though this should be abstracted away from both the user and the developer. Okay, that's it for today. Please let me know if you want to build on T1, if any of this speaks to you. And also, if we have time for questions, I would love, no, we don't, no questions, so please find me after the talk or hit me up on Telegram or on X for any questions. Thank you so much, guys.